Hello grade 9 and welcome to your first revision sheet video. The title of your sheet is Hands. Read the following selection in which the author recounts the problem of a man who was never able to read and write and the attempts made by his family to help him. When you are through with the reading, answer the questions that follow. Okay guys, I cannot stress enough how important it is to read the blurb first of all. Because this part, before you start reading the selection, contains the main idea of the text. And if you are to start reading the text before reading the blurb, you will be confused and you will not know quite what you are reading. And many times they will ask you about the main idea of the text, and it is definitely included in the blurb. Okay, hands. My father's hands were rough and as strong as a wrestler's hands. He could gently prune a fruit tree or family wrestle a stubborn mule into a harness. He could mark and saw a piece of wood with speed and accuracy. However, what I remember most is the special warmth from those hands, as he would take me by the shoulder and point out the glittering swoop of a blue hawk or a rabbit asleep in its lair. They were good hands that served him well and failed him in only one thing. They never learned to write. When my father started school, the punishment for a wrong answer was 10 strokes of a ruler across a stretched palm. For some reason, words and numbers just did not make any sense to him. After several months, he was taken out of school and put to work on a farm. Okay, as we read paragraph 2, we start to notice how the father's character is revealed. He couldn't process words, he couldn't process numbers, as if he had some sort of learning disability that was not diagnosed at that time. How do we know that this story was written? The setting of the story was according to the old times, because at that time the punishment for a wrong answer was 10 strokes of a ruler. So instead of diagnosing whether this student has a learning disability, which maybe a counselor or a psychologist could help him with, they would just punish him or her with hitting or maybe yelling. Years later, my mother, educated to the 4th year in primary school, often tried to teach him to read. Many years later still, I often grasped his big fist between my small hands and awkwardly helped him trace the letters of his name. But he always grew restless. Restless means like he started to fidget and he wants to get up and he doesn't want to continue. Okay, frustrated. Fiddling with his fingers and flexing his hands, he would declare that he had enough. Then one night, when he thought no one was looking, he slipped away with my 2nd grade reader and labored over the words. What does the word labored here mean in this context? Labored means he tried hard and hard. He worked hard. He pressed his forehead into the pages and wept. Wept means cried. It's the past tense of weep. Not even a child's book, he moaned. After that, no amount of persuasion could bring him to sit with a pen or paper. No one could convince him, okay, to ever try again. Once when my mother was away, Dad went to the store and returned with food for the dinner. After the meal, he said he had a surprise for dessert and went out to the kitchen, where I could hear him opening a can. Then everything was quiet. I went to the doorway and saw him standing before the sink with the open can in his hands. The picture looked just like pears, he mumbled. Mumbled means spoke to himself. He walked out and sat on the back steps. I knew he was deeply hurt. The can read whole white potatoes. So what he thought he brought for his family dessert was pears, which is a fruit, and he mistook the potatoes for pears. Because why? He could not read what was written on the can. Okay, but the picture on the table did look a great deal like pears. I went and sat beside him and asked if he would point out the stars. He knew where the plow and all the other stars were located, and we talked about how they got there in the first place. Here it's as if the son was trying to console his father. I mean, asking him something that he knew, that he knows a lot about, like the stars, the different constellations, in order maybe to give him some self-confidence and to get him out of his miserable mood. He kept that can on a shelf in the woodshed for a long while. On several occasions, I saw him turning it in his hands, as if the touch of the words would teach his eyes to read and his hands to write. The last time I saw Dad, he was walking across the hillside meadow with those big, warm hands, now unhappy with age, resting on the shoulders of my two children. He stopped to point out to them a pond where he and I fished and swam years before. That night, my family and I flew to a new home overseas. Overseas means abroad. That was the last time I saw him alive. Okay, so we notice how the son was telling us about the really tough life that his father led because of his learning disability. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, no matter how much he tried, no matter how much they tried to help him. Okay, let's answer the following questions. Those are generally referential. The father's hands failed him in only one thing. What was that one thing? We talked about how good he was at the farm, with plowing, with wrestling the mules, but the only thing that those hands failed him with was learning to write. They did everything except learn how to write. What attempts means tries, were made to teach the author's father to read and write? Who tried to teach him? Okay, first of all, the attempts were 3 ones. The writer's mother first tried to teach him. The writer himself, or the narrator if you want, tried awkwardly to help him to trace the letters of his name, and the writer's father tried too when he got a 2nd grade reader and labored over the words. Okay, name one adjective that describes the father's personality. Give a piece of evidence from the text. How would you describe the father? You guys might give me different adjectives, and if you justify them correctly, you would get a correct answer. Okay, so I'm looking for answers with things like desperate, hopeless. You can say frustrated. That is a very good adjective to describe him. Restless and frustrated. Why was he frustrated? Because he wasn't able to learn, no matter what attempts were made to teach him. That would be your piece of evidence. He is frustrated because no matter what attempts were done to teach him, he was never able to process words. He was never able to read and write, process words or numbers. You can say he's desperate. You can say how sad he felt after the attempts that were made to help him, yet all went in vain. Okay? Hopeless is the same as desperate. Number 4, very important. The word hands has been suggested as a title for this story. Do you think this is a suitable title? Hands. Okay, this would be something you will learn a lot in grade 10, but it's important to know it now. It's important to know that a title is a very small summary of the whole idea, of the whole main idea of the text. When I read your word or 2 words or 3 words or whatever in your title, I need to be able to know what your text, your story, or your essay is about from those few words, or maybe from just 1 word. Okay, here I know that this text is going to be talking about hands. Okay, is it suitable? Yes, because the whole text was talking about how the father's hands were so good at everything in his life and his work, but they failed him in only one thing. They couldn't read, they couldn't write. Okay, now pick and write the noun that each of the pronouns underlined in the text refers to. They in paragraph 1, they. You have to read before, the part where the pronoun is, and sometimes the part after. Okay, so you have to be very careful. They were good hands that served him well and failed him in only one thing. They never learned to write. Of course, they refers to hands. They never learned to write. They in paragraph 7, let's read before. He knew where the plow and all the other stars were located, and we talked about how they got there in the first place. What got there? The plow and all the other stars. Of course, the plow is one constellation of stars. They gave it the name of the plow because it looks like a plow. Paragraph 8, them. Okay, he stopped to point out to them. Okay, this is not enough. I need to read before. The last time I saw that, he was walking across the hillside meadow with those big, warm hands, now unhappy with age, resting on the shoulders of my 2 children. He stopped to point out to them a pond where he and I fished and swam years before. Them obviously refers to the 2 children, or you can say the father's grandchildren, okay? Or the narrator's 2 children. That would be equally correct. Those are the answers here, and this is how they should be written. The pronoun they in paragraph 1 refers to hands. The pronoun they in paragraph 7 refers to stars, full stop. The pronoun them in paragraph 8 refers to the 2 children or the grandchildren or the narrator's 2 children. Moving on to the vocab. Find words in paragraphs 3, 4, and 6 which most nearly have the following meanings. I gave you the paragraphs, grabbed or caught. What word in paragraph 3 means grabbed or caught? Let's read. Years later, my mother, educated to the 4th year in primary school, often tried to teach him to read. Well, nothing there. Many years later, still, I often grasped his big fist between my small hands, okay? His big fist between my small hands and awkwardly helped him to trace the letters, just like a KG teacher would do to a child. Okay, grasped his hands. So obviously, grabbed or caught means grasped. Convincing. Okay, convincing. You actually try to persuade someone, convince someone to do something. Then one night when he thought no one was looking, he slipped away with my 2nd grade reader and labored over the words. Nothing there means convincing. He pressed his forehead into the pages and wept. Not even a child's book, he moaned. After that, no amount of persuasion could bring him to sit with a pen or paper. Persuasion, tell someone that this thing is good and you should do it. Convincing. Okay, now moving on to paragraph 6. Said something unclearly. Okay, when you speak to yourself and the words are unclear, you're just talking to yourself. The picture looked just like pears, he mumbled. He was speaking to himself. Just like this picture looks just like pears. Okay, he wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, so he's mumbling. Many times in the class when a student is speaking to themselves or being fidgety and restless and they start mumbling, the teacher would say, okay, stop mumbling. Mumbling means speaking to yourself, just like complaining in a way to yourself. Okay, so said something unclearly means mumbled. Now refer to paragraphs 5 and 6 to complete the following sentences. After the meal, the father went to the kitchen because, what did he want to do here when he got that can of what he thought was pears? He wanted to make dessert for his family, okay? Or you can say he wanted to surprise his family for dessert, or he had a surprise for dessert. Those are all equally correct. Number 2, instead of pears, there were, okay, that would be in paragraph 6. What were they? There were whole white potatoes. You need to complete that in the can. Full stop. Okay? Okay, now you need to find and correct the one grammatical error or mistake in each of the sentences below. Something very important. You have to identify the mistake and write it. You don't just write the correction, okay, because the person who's correcting your exam needs to know whether or not you located the mistake correctly, okay? So you write the mistake, put an arrow, and then you write your correction. Another thing you could do, but it will take you so much longer, is rewrite the whole sentence, but the mistakes should be written in a different color. But of course, don't ever use red on official exams. You can write it with green or with black if you're using blue, or vice versa. But the best way in an official exam is to write it this way. You write your mistake and then you write its correction after the error. Now let's take a look at the sentence and explain the mistake. The mother has tried to teach him reading before the writer helped him to trace the letters. First of all, we have before, okay, and we're talking about two actions that happened in the past. Okay, this is a classic example of the past perfect. Two actions happened in the past, one happened before the other. So the first one that happened should be expressed in the past perfect. Had plus past participle. So of those two, the mother has tried to teach him. Okay, this happened in the past, and the writer helped him to trace the letters. What happened before? We said the mother has tried to teach him. So is this written correctly? Is this written in the past perfect? No. The past perfect is written as had tried. Two actions in the past, one happened before the other. The one that happened before needs to be expressed as past perfect, had tried, and this one is completely correct. Okay. Number two, nowadays, currently, the writer is believing his father is important to him than ever. Okay, is believing. Okay, even though it's happening, we're talking currently. Can I write the word believe in ing form? Of course not. We talked about those stative or stative verbs. Those are verbs of the mind, verbs of a state, of a feeling, of a sense. Okay, we do not use them in the ing form, so I cannot say I am appreciating you even though it's happening at the moment. I am hating this lesson even though it's happening at the moment. Those are all verbs of state, a state of mind or a feeling or a mental state, and they cannot be expressed in the ing form even if they are taking place at the moment of speaking. How do we express them if we cannot put them in the ing form? We have to put them in the present simple instead. So the writer is believing, completely wrong. You have to write not only believing, is believing. The whole tense is wrong. I need to write it in the present simple. Is believing becomes believes. Now we come to the final part, which you will get on every single official exam. Rewrite the following sentences starting as indicated, and of course without changing the meaning. The narrator and his mother helped the father to read and write. The father. Where's the father here? So obviously this is the direct object. We're talking, okay, what's our subject here? The narrator and his mother. Subject. What did they do? Helped. Helped whom? Okay, who took the action? The father. Okay, to read and write. So this is an example of an active passive rewriting. So when we put the direct object here, I want to write it in the passive form. Okay, this is in the active. Why? Because the subject is at the beginning. Okay, and it's the party that did the action. The narrator and his mother helped. Helped whom? Helped the father. So when we put the direct object at the beginning, it means we're writing it in the passive voice. Okay, how do we write the passive voice? Verb be plus past participle. What verb be do we need to use? Okay, let's take a look at the verb. You go to the verb helped. What tense is that? Past simple. What's the past simple of verb be? Was or were? The father was or were? Of course, the father was. The father was, and then the past participle of helped remains helped since it's regular. The father was helped by the narrator and his mother, full stop. That's active passive. Now, of course, number 2, we immediately look at it and we see quoted speech. So we need to change a quoted speech into a reported speech. We took the rules, we took the tense change, okay? The picture looks like pears, the father said. The father said, so we're reporting that. We say, the father said that. The picture, now what do we do with the verb? We move one step back in the timeline. So every present tense becomes its past tense. Looks becomes looked. Present simple, past simple. Present perfect, past perfect. Present progressive, past progressive. However, if you have past simple, when you move one step back in the timeline, past perfect. Okay? So the father said that the picture looked like pears, full stop. Of course, we remove the first step in reported speech, we remove the quotations. Okay? Now 3, this is of course an example of an inversion. Why? Because we started with a negative adverbial. The man tending the farm had not learned to read and write ever. So we started with the negative adverbial to stress our point here, to make our point more, more heard, more focused. Never. Do we have a helping verb? Yes, we do. If we don't have a helping verb, you're going to have to use verb do in the tense of the main verb in your sentence. We do have one, however. So, never had, it's an inversion because we invert the helping verb and the subject, which is the man tending the farm. Never had the man tending the farm. What do we do with the not? Why do we erase it? Because we cannot have a double negative. Okay, we have to remove the not. Never had the man tending the farm learned to read and write. Okay, so this is it for your worksheet. I hope it's clear to you. For any further questions you might have, of course, please ask me during class. Bye.